We have a system that was designed 120 years ago to serve a society that existed in the 1890s. It is substantially in place today. About 80 to 85% of what was designed back in the 1890s is part of our system today. So we're twisting and torquing and coaxing that system to try and meet the needs of a society that no longer exists, that was designed for a system that no longer exists. In the 1890s, and many of you will know this story, Committee of 10 created what we now know largely as our system. They designed the structure of classes, the sequence of curriculum. Much of what we take for granted is 120 years old. It was created for an economy, a society, that needed a relatively small portion of the population to be educated at a high level, while the rest of the population had relatively low skills, but was ready to engage in work that was not intellectually challenging, that was highly repetitive, boring, didn't require much in the way of problem solving, and was going to be closely supervised. Sounds a lot like school, doesn't it? Well, the reality is that at that time, low skills could still get you a good paying job. You could raise a family, own a home. When they were invented, cars, boats, maybe even a vacation home. But those jobs are disappearing, or in many cases have disappeared. They no longer exist and they're not coming back. Yet we engage in a variety of really well-intended and often somewhat effective in the current system of initiatives, ranging from differentiated instruction, RTI, strategic intervention, but those efforts are all to overcome the design problems in our current system. What we need is to rethink the system that we have and replace it with a system that matches what we need. You see, the system we have was created by people, not unlike the people in this room. The work they did actually was really very good. In fact, it matched the needs of our society for more than a half century. But over the past few decades, the design of the system and the needs of society have progressively diverted. But because of the success of the old system, it's hard to let it go. But the time has come to do it. We cannot afford to wait longer, particularly if our commitment really is to educate all students, 100%, to high level. Now you may say to yourself, well, isn't that the work of politicians and policymakers? Well, they're about to double down on the current system and the reforms that haven't worked over the past 2 decades. The truth is, help is not on the way. If it were, it would already be here. We've known about this problem long enough that if that were going to be the case, it would be happening now. The change I'm talking about is change that people like us in this room have to do. If you know anything about the research of Marzano, McNulty, and Waters about first order, second order change, we're talking about second order change. And second order change is always done by the practitioners. The experts come later after the heavy lifting is done. This is work we must do. The great news is we know how to do this. In fact, if you look at the research of Benjamin Bloom in the University of Chicago back in the 1980s, he was engaged in a project that was called the 2 Sigma Challenge. The 2 Sigma Challenge was about research that they had done, repeated research, around personalized learning, or at that point they were calling it tutoring, one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three. What they found was that high-quality tutoring can generate levels of student learning. That's 2 standard deviations, on average, among a traditional classroom, compared to a traditional classroom. What does that mean? Well, it means that on average, students who are engaged in high-level tutoring, personalized learning, can achieve at 90% higher on average than those students who typically are educated in a traditional classroom. And by the way, the configuration of the data was such that 90% of the students who engaged in tutoring were matching the achievement of the top 20% in the traditional classroom. We're talking significant difference. Now, this is not magic. If you think about an environment in which students are being tutored, they get immediate feedback. The level of instruction is calibrated to where the student is. That is, leading edge of challenge, but still enough that a student can be successful. When a misconception develops, it can immediately be addressed. We don't wait until it's fully settled in a student's mind and is difficult to get rid of. The student's interests are taken into account. If it's a circumstance where other students need to be brought in for collaboration, that's done in real time, not 3 days later, not when there's another lesson plan, when the student needs it. And by the way, the final finding was that students who have been tutored almost never need remediation, because the things we try to remediate are taken care of in real time.